Welcome to the third episode of Westbrook's COVID Conversations. Joining me today is Paul Weiner from ENS. Paul is an executive in the Insolvency, Restructuring and Business Rescue Department at ENS. And today we'll be discussing business rescue and the concept of reckless trading, especially with COVID-19. Paul, thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
So Paul, maybe to start off with, we're hearing more and more about this concept of business rescue, especially with businesses starting to struggle more and more in COVID-19. For those people who aren't familiar with what business rescue is, can you give us a brief overview?
Yes, well, just really brief history. We used to have a concept in South Africa known as judicial management, but that never really worked because it was too expensive. And in reality, the people who were appointed as judicial managers were in effect liquidators, and it had a really bad track record, judicial management. And in 2011, the Companies Act incorporated a specific chapter called Chapter 6, which specifically deals with business rescue. And that's to try and save companies rather than for companies to be liquidated.
And Paul, what exactly does the business rescue process entail?
Well, why are you seeing a lot of press lately with COVID-19 in regard to companies that are thinking or have gone into business rescue is business rescue really gives you a breathing space. It gives a company a breathing space to reorganize its affairs, and there's a moratorium on the payment of all creditors' claims. That's in terms of Section 133 of the Companies Act. So you can keep your creditors at bay, and during that time, you can try and restructure your affairs as a company, either by conversion of debt to equity or giving creditors a haircut and trying to then remain in business. And business rescue actually has two parts to it. There's a part A, where the company can continue in existence on a solvent basis by reorganizing its affairs, as I've just spelled out. Or if that is not possible, you can also use business rescue for the purposes of doing a wind down. And if you can show that by doing a wind down, you can pay creditors more in a better dividend in a business rescue than you'd be able to pay it in a winding up, in a liquidation of a company.
So Paul, we often hear about the business rescue practitioner. Does a company lose control over its affairs during the process of business rescue? And my understanding is that the practitioner takes control during that period. Is that correct?
The practitioner takes control, and the board is subservient to the business rescue practitioner. And the board or any of its directors or any management can't do anything except with the consent of the business rescue practitioner.
So the idea is that an independent third party appointed comes in, takes control over the company, and on an independent basis determines the best outcome or way forward for that company, and then actions on it. Is that sort of the high-level concept of business rescue?
Correct. And business rescue, if the company applies for business rescue, is a simple process. All they've got to do is file a resolution with the CIPC, and in that resolution, they've got to show, obviously, that the company is financially distressed and that there's a reasonable probability, a reasonable possibility of rescuing the company.
And how long does the process normally take?
Look, obviously, it depends on the company concerned. A much larger company with more complexities will take longer. But a business rescue practitioner should file a business rescue plan within 25 days of his appointment. But if that's not possible, he only needs to get the majority of creditors in favor of an extension, and he will get an extension to file a business rescue plan.
So Paul, we've obviously seen some high-level business rescue processes into in the last few months. Obviously, SAA is a notable one that comes to mind. And just the other day, COME. What I found interesting about the COME announcement was when you normally ascribe business rescue to a negative type of event, COME almost put a positive spin on it. I think their quote was saying that the business rescue process was undertaken in order to, and I quote, ensure the long-term survival of the company. Does it stand to reason that business rescue is not always necessarily a bad thing?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but we as a firm always recommend that before a company decides to file for business rescue, they must do a pre-assessment beforehand. They must know what the pitfalls are of a business rescue and what a business rescue can cause. For example, it could result in a cancellation of certain contracts, lucrative contracts. So you've got to check that business rescue is not tantamount to an event of default, entitling the other contracting party to cancel. Then your whole cash flow changes in a business rescue because you've got to pay critical suppliers. Then one doesn't know whether one part of the business is good, one part of the business is bad, and what you will be able to do with the business. And for that reason, we always recommend do a pre-assessment beforehand to see whether you are a candidate for business rescue. Because it doesn't work in each and every case. There are more failures than successes.
And are there any conditions that a company must meet in order to go into business rescue? Or is it as simple as passing of a resolution?
If the company itself is applying, then it's as simple as passing a resolution. And in fact, the company gets to choosing and nominating its own business rescue practitioner. But other affected persons, for example, a shareholder or employees, would have to apply to court if they wanted to put a company into business rescue.
Paul, maybe just one last subject that I wanted to touch on is the concept of reckless trading. Obviously, with COVID-19, many businesses are neither solvent nor liquid, and yet many are struggling trying to survive. How does the interplay work with the concept of trading recklessly under the Companies Act? How does that interplay with the concept of reckless trading in the Companies Act at the moment?
Well, in terms of the Companies Act, if the directors or a board believes that they will become insolvent within the next 6 months, or that they anticipate that they won't be able to pay their debts within 6 months, they should apply for business rescue. If they don't, they are supposed to send a letter, which is known as, it's catered for in section 129(7) of the Companies Act. And that letter is a letter addressed to creditors advising creditors why the company is not applying for business rescue. Now, the problem with sending a letter like that, you've got to look at the commercial ramifications. As soon as you send a letter like that to creditors, they'll cut you off. They won't supply a company any longer. So you've got to see whether you genuinely believe as a board that business rescue will be to the advantage of everybody. And if it's not, one should certainly just not go and send out a letter if you believe that there are other ways to try and save the company. For example, discussing it first with your creditors, try and get an extension before filing straight away for business rescue. And it's only in those cases where you know that you will not be able to trade successfully, that if you incur credit you won't be able to pay, that you should only then decide to apply for business rescue. In my view, if you have not been able to get any extension or if creditors are not prepared to assist you.
Paul, clearly a complex concept and many moving parts to consider.
Sure. Just remember that with COVID-19, it's quite different because a lot of companies aren't incurring any credit during this period because they're not trading. And any credit that they might be incurring might be insignificant. It's easy. So I don't think you can say that they're reckless or waiting to see what might possibly happen after COVID-19.
Paul, if a business out there is looking for more guidance and information on this concept of reckless trading and business rescue, who should they contact?
Look, obviously, they could always speak to people they know who take appointments as business rescue practitioners. But if it goes legal, they can certainly contact our firm. We've got a very big team that deals with restructuring and insolvency, especially matters that are directly linked to COVID-19.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you so much for the time. It's really been very, very enlightening and it's very much appreciated.
Pleasure. Obviously, in the short space of time available, I can't give you much.
But it's enough to start. That's Paul Weiner. He's an executive in the insolvency restructuring and business rescue team at ENS, giving us a little bit more insights into those topics. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Dino.